I'm April, and I'm 28 years old. 3 hours ago, I watched my own brother accept applause for artwork I painted when I was 10. Right now, he's being handcuffed in front of New York's most prestigious art collectors, and honestly, I'm enjoying every second of it. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely invisible in your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. But let me back up to how we got here, because this story doesn't start with justice. It starts with a little girl who believed her family would always support her dreams. I was 7 when I painted my first real picture. Not the finger painting chaos most kids make, but an actual landscape of our backyard maple tree in autumn. The colors were so vivid my art teacher called my parents for a conference. April has exceptional talent, Mrs. Rodriguez told them, holding up my painting. You should consider nurturing this gift. My father glanced at the painting, then at his watch. She's just copying what she sees. Kids do that. My mother nodded, already distracted by my older brother Marcus's soccer trophy sitting on the kitchen counter. The painting went into a drawer, forgotten. Marcus and my younger brother Derek were the golden boys. Marcus excelled at business, even as a teenager. Derek had this natural charm that made adults melt. They both inherited my father's sharp mind for numbers and my mother's social grace. Me? I inherited my grandmother's artistic eye and my grandfather's stubborn streak. Every family gathering became a performance where I played the supporting role to my brother's starring parts. Marcus just made his first 1,000 selling baseball cards, Dad would announce proudly. Derek scored the winning goal again. Then, almost as an afterthought, April drew another picture today. The word another always stung. Like my art was just a repetitive hobby, not something meaningful. My paintings covered my bedroom walls, but they might as well have been invisible. When relatives visited, they'd admire Marcus's business plans and Derek's athletic awards, then glance briefly at my art before moving on to more important things. By high school, the pattern was set. I was the dreamy one, the impractical one, the one who needed to get her head out of the clouds. While my brothers were being groomed for success, I was being tolerated for my differences. Art's a nice hobby, my mother would say when I talked about art school, but you need to think about a real career. The irony wasn't lost on me. They valued everything except the one thing that made me unique. And that little girl with the paintbrush? She learned to stay quiet and keep creating, even when nobody was watching. Art school changed everything and nothing. At the Rhode Island School of Design, I finally found my people. Professor Martinez saw my portfolio and actually gasped. This emotional depth, this technical skill combined with raw intuition. April, you have something truly special here. For 4 years, I lived in a world where my art mattered. My professors understood the language of color and composition. My classmates stayed up until 3 a.m. discussing technique and meaning. We were broke, paint-stained, and absolutely alive. Professor Chen pulled me aside junior year. Your work has this haunting quality that separates good artists from great ones. Don't let anyone convince you to paint what sells. Paint what moves you. I graduated summa cum laude with a BFA and a portfolio that made my professors weep. Literally. Professor Martinez wiped his eyes at my senior exhibition. You're going to change how people see contemporary art, he said. Promise me you won't give up. Then I came home. So what's your plan? My father asked the day after graduation, not even glancing at my diploma hanging proudly on my childhood bedroom wall. Art school was expensive. Time to start seeing some return on that investment. I'd prepared for this conversation. I'm applying for gallery representation. Professor Martinez knows several dealers in New York. My senior thesis piece caught attention from, "That's nice, sweetheart," my mother interrupted, setting down a newspaper article about Marcus's latest business venture. But what about a real job? Something with benefits? You can't eat paintings. They didn't understand that my art wasn't just pretty pictures. Each piece carried pieces of my soul, stories that needed telling, emotions that demanded expression. My paintings explored themes of family dynamics, identity, belonging, subjects that felt increasingly relevant given my circumstances. I spent 8 months sending portfolios to galleries. Rejection after rejection filled my inbox. Beautiful work, but not commercial enough. Technically excellent, but lacks market appeal. Try us again when you've developed a more sellable style. Marcus landed his first 6-figure consulting contract. Derek started his own marketing firm. Meanwhile, I was working at a coffee shop, coming home paint-splattered and exhausted, only to hear about my brother's latest achievements over dinner. Maybe you should consider teaching, my aunt suggested during one family gathering. Art teachers have steady paychecks. The suggestion felt like defeat wrapped in practicality. Teaching meant giving up on my own artistic journey to help others pursue theirs. But the real breaking point came during Derek's engagement party. I'd spent weeks creating a custom painting for him and his fiancée, a beautiful piece capturing their favorite hiking spot. When I presented it, Derek smiled politely. "Thanks, sis. We'll find somewhere to hang it." Later, I overheard him joking with cousins. "April's still trying to make this art thing happen." Sweet, but completely unrealistic. That night, staring at my reflection in my childhood mirror, surrounded by dozens of paintings that nobody valued, I made a decision that would haunt me for years. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was delusional. Maybe it was time to accept reality and find a real career. New York City was supposed to be my fresh start, my chance to prove everyone wrong. I arrived with 2 suitcases, $300, and enough artwork to fill a small gallery. The energy was intoxicating. Street art on every corner, galleries in converted warehouses, artists making magic from nothing. I found a tiny studio apartment in Queens that ate half my savings just for the security deposit. The walls were thin, the neighbors loud, but it was mine. I transformed that cramped space into an artist's haven, canvases stacked against every wall, natural light streaming through the single window. My first break came through a coffee shop in Brooklyn. The owner, Maria, loved my paintings and offered me wall space. 20% commission on anything that sells, she said, helping me hang my favorite pieces. For 3 months, I watched customers admire my work, take photos, ask questions. Several people expressed serious interest. 0 sales. I tried Washington Square Park on weekends, joining the other street artists with my easel and hopeful smile. Tourists would stop, compliment my technique, ask about prices, then they'd walk away to buy t-shirts and keychains instead. $5 sketches were my only income source, barely enough for subway fare home. The gallery circuit was brutal. I'd dress in my one professional outfit and walk from gallery to gallery, portfolio heavy in my arms. Most wouldn't even look at my work. "We're not accepting new artists. Try the galleries in Queens. Your style isn't what we're looking for right now." Meanwhile, my bank account dwindled to nothing. I took a job at a tourist restaurant in Times Square, serving overpriced food to people who barely noticed I existed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Surrounded by Broadway theaters and world-class museums, yet I couldn't even afford to see a show or visit the Met. My apartment became a storage unit. Canvases covered my bed, my tiny kitchen table, even the bathroom floor. I painted between double shifts, often until sunrise, creating pieces that captured the loneliness and determination of chasing an impossible dream. 6 months in, reality hit hard. I was behind on rent, living on ramen noodles, and my artistic output was suffering from exhaustion. When my landlord posted an eviction notice, I swallowed my pride and called home. "We tried to warn you," my mother said, though her voice held a note of sympathy. "Maybe it's time to come back, get a stable job, and paint as a hobby." Marcus offered to help with a security deposit if I'd move back and think practically. Derek suggested I could do freelance design work for his marketing firm, real work that uses your artistic skills. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I found a room in a 5-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, sharing space with 4 other struggling artists. My room was actually a partitioned section of the living room, just big enough for a mattress and my easel. Privacy was non-existent, but the rent was manageable, and for the first time in months, I wasn't alone in my struggle. That's when I learned that talent isn't enough, that passion doesn't pay bills, that sometimes even your deepest dreams aren't enough to overcome a world that doesn't value what you offer. 3 years of rejection letters, empty bank accounts, and family disappointment finally broke me. I was 25, sharing a converted living room with complete strangers, and my latest gallery submission had been returned with a form letter so impersonal, they'd spelled my name wrong. I sat on my mattress, surrounded by dozens of paintings that represented years of my life, and made the hardest decision I'd ever faced. It was time to give up. My roommate Jessica found me crying over my canvases. "You're incredibly talented, April," she said, sitting beside me on the floor. "But maybe it's time to think about Plan B." Plan B. The phrase my family had been pushing since art school graduation. I packed my paintings into storage, keeping only a few small pieces that could fit in the corner of my tiny space. Each canvas that went into that storage unit felt like burying a piece of my soul. But I couldn't keep living like this. Constantly broke, constantly rejected, constantly disappointing the people who claimed to love me. The job search was humbling in a different way. My BFA meant nothing to most employers. My years of artistic pursuit translated to unreliable dreamer on most applications. Finally, I found work with Premier Catering Services, a high-end company that served New York's elite events. The uniform was crisp, black and white, the pay was decent, and the tips could be surprisingly good. More importantly, it required no emotional investment. I could serve champagne and canapes, collect my paycheck, and save money for my real plan. Getting enough financial stability to train for a practical career. My first event was a corporate party in a midtown high-rise. Watching successful people network and celebrate achievements they valued made me feel invisible in a completely different way. But invisible felt safer than vulnerable. Nobody expected creativity from a server. Nobody critiqued my life choices or suggested I was wasting my potential. The work was physically demanding, but mentally freeing. I'd serve hundreds of people each week. Lawyers, doctors, business people, socialites. Their conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes reminded me of my brother's dinner table discussion. These were the people my family expected me to become. At home, my remaining art supplies gathered dust. Sometimes I'd catch myself sketching on napkins during breaks, but I'd quickly throw them away. That part of my life was over. I was 28 years old, and it was time to be practical. My family was relieved when I called to tell them about my steady job. Finally, my father said, a reliable paycheck. Now you can start building a real future. Marcus offered to help me research night school programs for business or accounting. Derek suggested I could work my way up in the catering industry. Restaurant management could be perfect for you. For the first time in years, my family approved of my choices. It should have felt good. Instead, it felt like dying a slow death. But at least I wasn't disappointing anyone anymore. At least I could pay my bills and sleep on a schedule and live like a normal person. The plan was simple. Work for 2 years, save every penny possible, get my own apartment, then figure out a practical career path that didn't involve paintbrushes or impossible dreams. Just 2 years of serving other people's celebrations before I could start my real, sensible life. What I didn't know was that in 3 months, I'd be serving champagne at an event that would change everything. Premier Catering kept me busy with 3 events per week, sometimes more during wedding season. I developed a routine: black slacks pressed, white shirt spotless, hair pulled back in the regulation bun. Smile politely, serve efficiently, collect tips, go home, repeat. The Whitman Gallery event on Friday night seemed like any other high-end affair. Art auctions always attracted New York's cultural elite, the kind of people who bought paintings for investment portfolios rather than emotional connection. I'd served similar events before, watching wealthy collectors bid casually on pieces worth more than most people's annual salaries. But something felt different as I arranged champagne glasses on silver trays. Maybe it was the energy in the room, or maybe I was finally starting to heal from my artistic disappointment. For the first time in months, I found myself actually looking at the artwork instead of just moving efficiently between guests. The gallery was stunning. White walls, dramatic lighting, pieces arranged to create visual conversations across the space. As I worked, I caught glimpses of paintings that stirred something dormant inside me. Bold brushstrokes, unexpected color combinations, emotional rawness that spoke to my artist's eye. "Excuse me, miss." A woman in pearls gestured to my tray. "Could I get a refill?" I poured her champagne, professional smile in place, but my attention kept drifting to the art. These weren't the safe, commercial pieces I'd seen at other gallery events. These had soul. The auction was scheduled for 8 o'clock. By 7:30, the gallery buzzed with anticipation. I circulated through the crowd, refilling glasses and clearing plates, half listening to conversations about artistic value and investment potential. These people spoke about art like stock prices. Cold, calculating, purely transactional. Then I saw it. At first, it was just a flash of familiar color from across the room, but as I moved closer, carrying a tray of canapes, my steps slowed. The painting was positioned prominently near the auction podium, dramatically lit, with a starting bid placard that made my stomach clench. $830,000. The composition stopped me cold. A landscape with a twisted oak tree dominating the foreground, autumn leaves scattered beneath its branches. The brushstrokes were loose but confident, the color palette warm but melancholy. Every detail was exactly as I remembered, because I had painted it. I was 10 years old, sitting in the backyard of a rental cabin during our family vacation to Vermont. My parents were inside arguing about dinner reservations while my brothers played video games. I'd found old art supplies in the cabin's closet and spent the entire afternoon capturing the massive oak tree that had fascinated me all week. My hands began to shake as I stared at my own work, now mounted in an expensive frame with professional lighting. The signature in the bottom right corner made my blood run cold. M. Richardson, 2019. Marcus Richardson. My brother had signed my childhood painting and was presenting it as his own work. I glanced around the gallery, searching for his face among the crowd of collectors and critics. There, near the bar, wearing an expensive suit I'd never seen before, laughing with a stunning blonde woman who looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Marcus, who had mocked my artistic dreams for years, was now literally profiting from my creativity, The irony was so brutal it almost made me laugh. While I was serving champagne to pay rent on a shared living space, my brother was selling my art to these same people for nearly $1 million. This was about to get very interesting. I stood frozen with my tray of canapes, watching Marcus charm the crowd like he belonged here. The blonde at his side, model thin diamond earrings, designer dress, gazed at him adoringly while he gestured toward his painting, my painting. The inspiration came during a particularly difficult period, I heard him saying to a small group of collectors. His voice carried that practiced confidence he'd perfected in business presentations. Art has always been my way of processing complex emotions. My way of processing complex emotions. I was 10 years old, trying to escape family tension by painting what I saw. Marcus had been 15, too cool to acknowledge my existence, let alone my art. I forced myself to keep moving, serving guests while my mind raced. How many other paintings had he taken from the storage container at our parents' house? How long had he been stealing my work? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? The auction would begin in 20 minutes. The gallery owner, a distinguished man in his 60s, was testing the microphone and reviewing his notes. Several serious bidders had already examined my painting closely, discussing its emerging market value and investment potential. I needed proof. My phone was in the staff break room, but I couldn't leave my post without permission. Think, April. Think like the artist you used to be, not like the server you've become. Then I remembered. My signature technique. Even at 10 years old, I'd had a habit of signing my initials on the back of canvases, usually in the bottom left corner where the frame would hide them. It was something my art teacher had taught us. Always mark your work, even if nobody else sees it. I watched Marcus lean down to whisper something in his companion's ear, making her laugh. The casual intimacy of the gesture infuriated me. Here was my brother, stealing credit for my creativity, while I served drinks to the people who would soon be bidding on my childhood dreams. But I had an advantage he didn't expect. I was invisible. In my server uniform, moving efficiently through the crowd, I was just part of the background. These people looked through me, not at me. And Marcus? He hadn't even noticed I was there. The gallery owner approached the podium, adjusting his tie. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please find your seats, we'll begin this evening's auction momentarily. I had one chance to change my life, one opportunity to reclaim what was mine and expose the brother who had spent years diminishing my dreams while secretly profiting from them. Time to stop being invisible. I approached the gallery owner with the respectful deference of a professional server. Excuse me, sir? I'm sorry to interrupt, but could I speak with you for just a moment? It's rather urgent. He glanced at me with mild annoyance, clearly focused on the upcoming auction. Whatever it is, can it wait? We're about to begin. It's about the Richardson painting, I said quietly, nodding toward my artwork. There's something you need to know before you put it up for auction. His expression shifted from annoyance to curiosity. What kind of something? I took a deep breath, feeling my old confidence returning like muscle memory. That painting? I created it 18 years ago when I was 10 years old, and I can prove it. The gallery owner, Mr. Whitman, studied my face with the intensity of someone who'd spent decades evaluating authenticity. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit impeccably tailored, and his expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued as I spoke. You're claiming to be the actual artist? He asked, glancing toward Marcus, who was still charming his audience near the bar. That's a very serious accusation, miss. April Richardson, I said, watching his eyebrows rise at the shared surname. Marcus is my older brother, and yes, I painted that piece when I was 10 years old during a family vacation to Vermont. I can prove it. Mr. Whitman's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s, had appeared beside us, clearly sensing drama. The auction was supposed to start in 15 minutes, and several high-profile bidders were already seated, programs in hand, ready to spend serious money. How exactly do you plan to prove this? Mr. Whitman asked, his voice low enough that nearby guests couldn't overhear. Because if you're right, this could be... He paused, considering the implications. Well, this could be quite the scandal. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out my order pad, the same one I'd been using to track drink orders all evening. May I borrow a pen? Without hesitation, I tore off a clean sheet and quickly signed my name in the same flowing script I'd been using since childhood. Then I turned the paper over and added my initials in the distinctive way I'd learned in elementary art class, a stylized A intertwined with an R, exactly how I'd signed every piece since I was 8 years old. Now, I said, meeting his eyes directly, check the back of that painting, bottom left corner under the frame. You'll find these exact initials. Mr. Whitman exchanged glances with his assistant. The auction room was filling up, conversations growing louder, anticipation building. Marcus was now posing for photos with potential bidders, my painting serving as his backdrop. This is highly irregular, Mr. Whitman murmured, but I could see the curator's instinct taking over. In the art world, authenticity was everything. A scandal involving fraud could destroy reputations, but it could also create the kind of buzz that made careers. Helen, have security quietly remove the Richardson piece. Tell them we need to verify something before the auction. As Helen hurried away, Mr. Whitman studied me more carefully. You said you were 10 when you painted this. That would make it nearly 20 years old. How did your brother gain access to it? When my parents moved 5 years ago, they rented a storage container for family belongings. All my childhood artwork went there, probably hundreds of pieces. All 3 children had keys. My voice grew steadier as the pieces fell into place. I'm guessing Marcus has been taking paintings for a while now. This might not be the first time he's done this. What happened next was beautiful to watch. Security guards approached my painting with the casual efficiency of professionals, but Marcus noticed immediately. His confident smile faltered as he watched 2 men in dark suits carefully lifting his masterpiece from its display position. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, striding toward them with the authoritative tone he'd perfected in boardrooms. "What are you doing with my painting?" His girlfriend, I'd learned her name was Veronica from overhearing their conversations, followed behind him, her designer heels clicking against the polished floor. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice carrying that particular brand of entitled concern that came with old money. Mr. Whitman approached them smoothly, his professional smile firmly in place. "Mr. Richardson, we need to verify some documentation before proceeding with the auction. Nothing to worry about. Just standard procedure for pieces in this price range." Marcus relaxed slightly, though I could see tension in his shoulders. "Of course. Whatever you need, I have all the provenance documentation in my hotel room if necessary." Provenance documentation? I almost laughed out loud. What could he possibly have fabricated to prove ownership of a painting I'd created in my childhood bedroom? "That won't be necessary just yet," Mr. Whitman assured him. "We'll have this resolved quickly." As the security team carried my painting toward a private viewing room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of standing up for my art. For the first time since giving up my dreams, I was fighting for something that mattered. Marcus returned to his group of admirers, but I noticed he kept glancing toward the door where my painting had disappeared. Veronica whispered something in his ear that made his jaw clench. Mr. Whitman gestured for me to follow him. "Miss Richardson, I think it's time we had a more private conversation." The private viewing room behind the main gallery felt like a combination of art storage and interrogation chamber. Harsh fluorescent lights illuminated white walls lined with paintings awaiting authentication or repair. In the center of the room, my childhood painting sat propped on an easel, looking both familiar and foreign under the clinical lighting. Mr. Whitman had summoned 2 authentication experts who'd been attending the auction as guests. Dr. Sarah Chen, a specialist in contemporary American art, and Professor Michael Torres, whose reputation for detecting art fraud was legendary in New York circles. Both examined my hastily written signature with magnifying glasses, their expressions professionally neutral. "The handwriting analysis will take time," Dr. Chen said, "but I'm more interested in this claim about initials on the back of the canvas." She gestured to the security guards. "Could you please turn this around very carefully?" As they rotated the painting, I felt my heart pounding. Everything depended on 10-year-old April's habit of signing her work completely, even where no one would see it. If I was wrong about the placement, if my memory had failed me after all these years, this would all fall apart. Professor Torres knelt beside the frame, using a small flashlight to examine the back corner. "There's definitely something here," he murmured, adjusting his glasses. "Helen, could you bring me that UV light from the authentication kit?" Under the ultraviolet light, my childhood initials appeared like magic. The same intertwined A and R I'd written on the paper, etched in faded pencil that had been invisible under normal lighting. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent bulbs overhead. "Well," Mr. Whitman said quietly, "this is quite compelling evidence." Dr. Chen photographed the initials, then compared them to my handwriting sample. "The muscle memory in handwriting is remarkably consistent over time," she explained. "These appear to match, but we'll need formal analysis to be certain." "How long have you been working here tonight?" Professor Torres asked me, his tone sharp but not unkind. "About 4 hours. I work for Premier Catering Services." I gestured toward my uniform. "This is my regular job now." Mr. Whitman's expression shifted to something resembling sympathy. "You gave up art professionally?" The question stung more than I expected. 3 years ago, I couldn't make it work financially. I looked at my painting, remembering the joy I'd felt creating it. I never imagined someone would steal my work to build their own career. "If your allegations prove correct," Professor Torres said carefully, Your brother has committed serious fraud. The legal implications could be significant. Through the viewing room's small window, I could see the main gallery where guests were growing restless. The auction had been delayed 20 minutes now, and Marcus was pacing near the bar, no longer the confident artist he'd been pretending to be. "What do you want to do?" Mr. Whitman asked me directly. "We could contact the police immediately, but that would mean stopping tonight's auction entirely, or—" He paused, a calculating look in his eyes. "We could handle this more dramatically." Dr. Chen looked up from her notes. "What exactly do you mean by dramatically?" "The art world loves a good revelation," Mr. Whitman said, his voice taking on an almost theatrical quality. "Imagine the impact of exposing this fraud in real time, in front of our most influential collectors and critics. It would generate enormous attention for both the gallery and Miss Richardson's authentic work." I felt a surge of something I'd almost forgotten, the desire to be seen, to be recognized for my actual talent instead of being dismissed as the family failure. "You're suggesting we expose him publicly?" "I'm suggesting we give you the recognition you've been denied," Mr. Whitman replied, "but the decision is entirely yours." Professor Torres frowned. "That seems unnecessarily theatrical. The proper authorities should handle this." "The proper authorities will handle it," Mr. Whitman assured him. "But first, we could give this young woman her moment. When was the last time you saw your art properly displayed, Miss Richardson?" The answer was never. My art had never been professionally displayed, never been properly lit, never been viewed by people who understood its value. The paintings I'd created in desperation and hope had gathered dust in storage units and coffee shops, while my family dismissed my dreams as impractical fantasies. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. Mr. Whitman smiled, and I recognized the expression of someone who'd built a career on understanding what people wanted to see. "How far is your apartment from here? And more importantly, how many paintings do you have in storage?" 23 minutes later, I was sitting in the back of a Blacktown car with 3 security guards, racing through Manhattan toward my storage unit in Queens. Mr. Whitman had made a series of rapid phone calls, transforming what could have been a simple fraud report into what he called an evening of artistic revelation. The plan was audacious. Retrieve as many of my paintings as possible, return to the gallery, and reveal the truth during what he was now calling a special presentation preceding tonight's auction. Marcus would be exposed not just as a thief, but as someone who had stolen work from a genuinely talented artist who deserved recognition. "This is insane," I muttered, watching familiar neighborhoods blur past the window. 6 hours ago, I'd been a failed artist serving champagne. Now I was racing across the city to reclaim a career I'd abandoned. My phone buzzed with texts from my roommates wondering why I wasn't home yet. I couldn't begin to explain what was happening. I wasn't entirely sure I understood it myself. The storage facility was a depressing concrete building in an industrial area of Queens. Under fluorescent lights that flickered ominously, I used my key to roll up the metal door of Unit 47B. The security guards watched as years of my artistic life revealed themselves in the form of dozens of canvases stacked against the walls. "Jesus," one of them whispered, and I realized they were looking at my work with genuine appreciation, not the polite dismissal I'd grown accustomed to from my family. We selected 12 pieces that could fit safely in the car, paintings that represented different periods of my artistic development, from childhood experiments to my more sophisticated college work. The security team handled them with the same careful attention they'd use for million-dollar masterpieces. Back in Manhattan, the gallery had been transformed. Word had somehow spread through the art community that something unprecedented was happening at the Whitman Gallery. The crowd had doubled in size, with additional collectors, critics, and curiosity seekers filling the space. Mr. Whitman met us at the back entrance, his eyes lighting up as he saw the paintings. "Magnificent," he said, examining a landscape I'd painted during my sophomore year at RISD. "The technical skill, the emotional depth. This is exactly what I hoped for." As the security team carefully transported my work inside, I caught a glimpse of Marcus through the gallery windows. He was standing near the bar with Veronica, both looking increasingly agitated. Other guests kept approaching him with questions he couldn't answer, and his confident facade was cracking. "Miss Richardson," Mr. A. Whitman said, guiding me toward a small office. "We've prepared something for you." Inside, I found a simple but elegant black dress, professional but artistic, hanging on a hook. "I took the liberty of having my assistant find something more suitable for your debut." My debut, the word sent shivers through me. This wasn't how I'd imagined my first real gallery showing, born from fraud and family betrayal, but it was happening. As I changed clothes, I could hear the crowd growing larger and more excited. Mr. Whitman had arranged for a photographer and a journalist from Art Forum to document what he was billing as an extraordinary evening of truth in art. When I emerged from the office, I barely recognized myself. The black dress fit perfectly. My hair had been quickly styled by someone who apparently worked in fashion, and for the first time in years, I looked like an artist again. "The police are here," Helen informed Mr. Whitman quietly. "They're waiting outside until we give the signal." My stomach clenched. This was really happening. In a few minutes, Marcus would be arrested for fraud, and my family would learn that their biggest disappointment had been creating valuable art all along. Mr. Whitman checked his watch. "It's time. Are you ready, Miss Richardson?" I looked through the office window at the gallery full of people who were about to see my work for the first time. My real work, not stolen shadows of it. People who understood art, who could recognize talent when they saw it. "I've been ready for this my whole life," I said. The main gallery buzzed with an energy I'd never experienced. Anticipation mixed with confusion, curiosity blended with excitement. Mr. Whitman had positioned my paintings throughout the space, creating an impromptu exhibition that showcased nearly 2 decades of artistic development. The contrast between my authentic work and the single stolen piece Marcus had been selling was stark and powerful. I stood in the wings, heart hammering as Mr. Whitman approached the podium. The crowd quieted, sensing something significant was about to unfold. Marcus stood near the front, Veronica clutching his arm, both clearly uncomfortable with the unexpected delay and mysterious, special presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Whitman began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent decades in the art world. Tonight was scheduled to be a standard auction featuring several promising contemporary pieces. However, an extraordinary situation has developed that I believe will interest everyone here. He gestured toward my childhood painting, now displayed prominently beside 3 of my college pieces. This evening, we discovered that the work attributed to Marcus Richardson was actually created by another artist entirely. An artist whose authentic body of work demonstrates exceptional talent and deserves immediate recognition. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Marcus's face go pale, his confident posture crumbling as he realized what was happening. Several people turned to look at him, confusion and suspicion replacing the earlier admiration. "I'd like to introduce you to the real artist, April Richardson." I walked onto the gallery floor on legs that felt simultaneously weak and strong. The crowd turned toward me, dozens of faces studying my appearance, connecting the woman in the black dress to the paintings surrounding them. "Miss Richardson created her first piece at age 7, Mr. Whitman continued, and has been developing her unique voice ever since. What you see here represents just a small sample of nearly 20 years of artistic evolution." Dr. Chen stepped forward, holding the authentication report. "We've verified that the initials on the back of the original piece match Miss Richardson's handwriting. Furthermore, the painting technique and artistic development evident in her body of work clearly demonstrates authorship." The gallery fell silent except for the soft click of the photographer documenting everything. I found my voice, surprised by its steadiness. "3 years ago, I gave up on my artistic dreams," I said, looking directly at Marcus, who seemed frozen in place. "I was told repeatedly that art wasn't a real career, that I needed to be practical, that I was wasting my time and talent on impossible dreams." My gaze swept across the crowd. Collectors who'd spent millions on art, critics who shaped careers, gallery owners who could make or break an artist's future. What I never imagined was that while I was struggling to survive as a server, someone would be stealing my work and claiming credit for my creativity. Marcus finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous," he said, but his words lacked conviction. "She's obviously trying to sabotage my career out of jealousy." Professor Torres stepped forward with photocopies of the authentication evidence. "Mr. Richardson, we have documented proof that this work was created by your sister. Would you care to explain how you came to possess it?" The room held its collective breath. Marcus looked around desperately, realizing he was surrounded by people who could end his fraudulent art career with a single phone call. Veronica had already taken several steps away from him, clearly calculating her exit strategy. We shared art supplies as children," Marcus stammered. "It's possible there was some confusion about who created what." 18 years of confusion?" I asked, my voice growing stronger. "Because this isn't the only painting you've taken from our family's storage container, Mr. Whitman nodded to Helen, who gestured toward the entrance. 2 police officers in plain clothes entered the gallery, moving purposefully through the crowd toward Marcus. The transformation in the room was immediate and electric. This wasn't just an art authentication. It was a live revelation of fraud being exposed in real time. Phones appeared as guests began documenting what they realized was an historic moment in the art world. "Marcus Richardson," one officer said calmly, "you're under arrest for art fraud and theft of intellectual property." As handcuffs clicked around my brother's wrists, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This was justice, but it was also the final destruction of what little family connection we'd maintained. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Marcus was led away, Veronica following behind the officers, likely to arrange legal representation. The dramatic scene would be talked about in art circles for years, but something else was happening that meant more than justice or revenge. People were looking at my paintings with the attention I'd craved my entire life. I heard phrases like exceptional technique and remarkable emotional depth and genuine artistic vision. For the first time in my life, my art was being seen. As the police car disappeared into Manhattan traffic with Marcus inside, the gallery erupted in conversations I'd dreamed of hearing my entire life. Collectors examined my paintings with magnifying glasses, critics took detailed notes, and gallery owners whispered to their assistants about exceptional emerging talent and investment potential. Mr. Whitman approached me with a group of serious-looking individuals. "April, I'd like you to meet some people." The introductions blurred together. Directors from major galleries, art consultants, collectors whose names I'd only read in magazines. Each handshake felt surreal. "Your technique is extraordinary for someone without formal representation," said Margaret Hartwell, whose gallery in Chelsea had rejected my portfolio 3 years earlier. She didn't recognize me, but she was now examining my college paintings with the intensity of someone discovering hidden treasure. "The emotional complexity in these pieces," added David Kim, a collector known for his contemporary acquisitions. "It reminds me of early Diebenkorn, but with a completely original voice." Original voice. The phrase I'd longed to hear since art school was now being applied to my work by people whose opinions could transform careers overnight. Dr. Chen appeared beside me with her phone. "April, I have someone on the line who wants to speak with you. Catherine Morrison from Art Forum." I took the phone with trembling hands. Catherine Morrison was one of the most influential art critics in the country. Her reviews could make or destroy artistic reputations. "Miss Richardson," came the crisp voice through the speaker, "I'm putting together an article about tonight's events for our next issue. This story of artistic authenticity versus fraud, combined with the quality of work I'm seeing in the photos, this could be transformational for your career." Transformational. Career. Words I'd given up hoping to hear in connection with my art. The auction, when it finally began an hour later, became something entirely different than anyone had planned. Instead of featuring Marcus's fraudulent work, it became an impromptu showcase of my authentic pieces. The bidding was intense and swift. My Vermont landscape, the painting that had started this entire revelation, sold for $8 million to a private collector who specialized in supporting emerging artists with exceptional stories. Other pieces followed, each selling for amounts I'd never imagined possible. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Whitman announced as the final bidding concluded, "tonight's total sales for April Richardson's work exceed $12 million. $12 million. 6 months ago, I'd been struggling to pay rent on a shared apartment. Now I was financially secure beyond anything I'd ever imagined. But the money, as incredible as it was, wasn't the most meaningful part of the evening. As the crowd gradually dispersed, many people approached me directly with business cards, exhibition offers, and requests for studio visits. "I'd like to discuss representation," said Elena Vasquez, whose gallery represented some of the most successful contemporary artists in New York. "Your work deserves a much larger platform. We're planning a group show focusing on artists who challenge conventional narratives," added another gallery director. "Your story, your art, it would be perfect for our theme." My phone buzzed constantly with texts and missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Word was spreading through art world networks faster than I could process. Around midnight, as the gallery staff cleaned up, I found myself alone with my paintings for the first time in years. Really alone, without the weight of family judgment or financial desperation or the crushing disappointment of repeated rejection. I walked slowly from piece to piece, seeing them displayed properly for the first time. Under professional lighting, with adequate space and respectful presentation, my work looked like what it had always been, the product of genuine artistic vision and years of dedicated development. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my parents' number. "April?" My mother's voice sounded strange, shaky. "We just heard about Marcus, about the arrest. Is it true?" News traveled fast, even to Cedar Springs. I could imagine my parents sitting in their living room, trying to process that their biggest disappointment had just become more successful than both their golden boys combined. "It's true, Mom. He stole my painting and claimed it as his own work." A long pause. "But April, you gave up art years ago. You said you were being practical." "I gave up trying to make a living from art," I corrected. "I never stopped being an artist." Another pause, then my father's voice in the background asking questions I couldn't hear clearly. "Honey," my mother continued, "the news is saying your painting sold for millions of dollars tonight. That can't be right." "It's right, Mom. 12 million, total." The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, my mother spoke in a whisper. "We had no idea you were that talented. Had no idea." After years of watching me paint, years of dismissing my work as impractical dreaming, years of suggesting I find a real career, they'd had no idea I was talented enough to succeed at the highest levels of the art world. I'd spent my entire life seeking their validation, their recognition, their support. Now, sitting in a gallery surrounded by sold paintings and business cards from influential art world figures, I realized I no longer needed their approval. "I have to go, Mom. There are people waiting to discuss my next exhibition." For the first time in our relationship, I hung up first. 3 months later, I stood in my new studio space in Soho, natural light flooding through floor-to-ceiling windows onto canvases that would comprise my first solo exhibition at the prestigious Hartwell Gallery. The transformation in my life had been so complete, so swift, that some mornings I still woke up expecting to put on a server's uniform. My phone buzzed with interview requests from art magazines, but I'd learned to be selective. The story of discovering my stolen artwork had captured public imagination, but I was determined to be known for my art itself, not just the dramatic circumstances of my discovery. Elena Vasquez had become my gallery representative, and under her guidance, I'd developed a 3-year plan that included exhibitions in New York, Los Angeles, and London. The Vermont landscape piece had been purchased by the Museum of Contemporary Art, where it would be permanently displayed alongside works by established masters. The money had allowed me to rent a 1-bedroom apartment in Greenwich Village, and this professional studio space. More importantly, it had given me the freedom to create without the desperate financial pressure that had driven me away from art 3 years earlier. But the most significant change wasn't financial or professional. It was personal. My family had reached out repeatedly since the auction. My parents called weekly now, their voices carrying a respect I'd never heard before. They wanted to understand my art, to be included in my success, to repair relationships they'd damaged through years of dismissing my dreams. Marcus had been released on bail pending trial, but the legal consequences were just beginning. More importantly for his reputation, the art world was small and unforgiving. His name had become synonymous with fraud, effectively ending any possibility of a legitimate career in art or business. Derek had called to apologize for years of dismissive comments. "I never understood what you were trying to do," he'd said. "I thought art was just, pretty pictures. I didn't realize it could be this important, this valuable." Their newfound appreciation felt hollow, based on external validation rather than genuine understanding of my artistic journey. They loved my success, not my art itself. They respected my bank account, not my creative vision. As I worked on a new series exploring themes of family dynamics and authenticity, I thought about the price of recognition. The art world had embraced me, but it took public humiliation of my brother and a dramatic revelation to make that happen. Would anyone have noticed my talent if not for the scandal? Dr. Chen had become something of a mentor, helping me navigate the transition from unknown artist to rising star. "Don't let cynicism poison your success," she'd advised during our last conversation. "Your work was always worthy of recognition. The circumstances of discovery don't diminish your talent." The gallery opening was scheduled for next week. Pre-sales had already exceeded expectations, with several pieces going to major collectors and museums. Art critics who'd previously ignored my submissions were now analyzing my work in prestigious publications. My doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. The delivery man handed me a package from Cedar Springs, my parents' address. Inside, I found a carefully wrapped painting I hadn't seen in years, a self-portrait I'd created at age 16, during my junior year of high school. The attached note was in my mother's handwriting. "April, we found this in the attic yesterday. We remember now how hard you worked on it, how proud you were when you finished it. We're sorry we didn't see then what everyone sees now. We love you. Mom and Dad." I propped the painting against my studio wall, studying the face of my teenage self. The technique was less sophisticated than my current work, but the artistic vision was already present. The desire to capture truth through color and composition, to reveal emotion through careful observation. That 16-year-old girl had believed in her talent even when nobody else did. She'd painted through family dismissal, financial pressure, and social expectations that suggested art wasn't a practical choice for someone like her. Looking at her now, I felt profound gratitude. She'd kept creating when creating seemed pointless. She'd maintained her artistic vision when everyone around her suggested she was wasting her time. Without her persistence, without her refusal to completely abandon her dreams even when she'd officially given up, there would have been no paintings for Marcus to steal, no body of work to authenticate, no artistic career to reclaim. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Times art critic wants to do a feature story. Coffee tomorrow to discuss?" I set the phone aside and returned to my current painting, a complex piece exploring the relationship between public recognition and personal validation. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent years seeking my family's approval for my art, only to discover that the art world's recognition mattered more. But the deepest satisfaction came from something simpler: the pure joy of creating without desperation, without financial pressure, without the crushing weight of constant rejection. For the first time in my life, I could paint simply because I had something to express. The late afternoon sun angled through my studio windows, casting dramatic shadows across my works in progress. I picked up my brush, mixed colors on my palette, and continued the work I'd been born to do. My family finally saw my value, but only after the world had told them it existed. The art establishment had embraced me, but only after a scandal made my story impossible to ignore. None of that changed the fundamental truth: I was an artist. I always had been. And finally, after years of doubt and struggle and compromise, I was free to create on my own terms. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding your authentic voice despite family doubt and societal pressure. Sometimes our greatest talents are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The brushstroke I just completed captured exactly the emotion I'd been seeking. Outside, New York City hummed with energy and possibility. Inside my studio, surrounded by years of reclaimed dreams made manifest, I painted toward a future that belonged entirely to me.